that's where, I mean, if you're a top K Street lobbyist and you're tasked with, what's the postmortem for the Democratic side? Like, what's the one recommendation? Is it like, don't do this whole switcheroo thing again? Is it, have a manlier candidate, wink, wink, nudge, nudge? Is it, don't fumble the VP pick? Like,
Right.
what's your recommendation?
Well, it'd be some mix of all of that, right? I mean, yeah, certainly, probably Josh Shapiro would have been the choice that they should have made for VP. I think that Walz was unable to connect on the whole masculinity side of it. When you really got down to it, I mean, he was a public school teacher, and I don't think that played so well. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much that they could have done better, and it's easy to I mean, and to be fair, I mean, the Trump campaign, they ran a pretty great campaign, I would say. I mean, obviously results are, they are what they are, and so they kind of explain it, in hindsight, but it's really tough to see the Democrats winning here. I mean, even if we're just to take a step back and say, did they have any chance at all, right? Given Biden was so unpopular, given what had happened to the economy under them, is that real wages got eroded by inflation, and people, were just really upset about that. I'm not sure they really ever had a chance. But like I said, I do think that, tacking to the middle for the Democrats is certainly the way forward. I think, Bernie Sanders put out an interesting letter or statement where he said that they need to become the party of the working class again. Not really sure what that means. I think that, I don't know if that just means more stimmy checks or what. I think really, though, what people want is they want an economy that's running well and that's running well for them. And specifically in terms of their wages and their ability to grow wealth, which they were increasingly not able to do under a Democratic administration that made that difficult through inflation, through taxing people higher as soon as they got into the middle class. I mean, there's just so many factors that led to this. It's kind of an overdetermined thing where there's a ton of reasons why they lost, and there's not one thing that they could fix to make it better. But I will say, after watching that Kamala speech, I feel like she's relieved. I think she's probably thrilled that she just doesn't have to do this anymore.
Yeah, especially because there was an undercurrent when the switcheroo was taking place of like, does Kamala want this? Like, she was down to like be the second most important person, have these pet projects like AI and the border, whoop-de-doo, all insignificant in the long run, that she perhaps didn't want to see her candle burn so bright so quick. And before the speech took place, the concession speech, I thought that it had, and this was probably the end of her, as a major political figure. After that speech, I am a little, I feel like I'm interested in buying low on Kamala. If it was prediction markets, if it was, some vague notion of who may see their stock rise in 2028, I could see a world in which Democrats talk themselves into another shapeshifter Kamala campaign that attempts to learn lessons, but also does largely the same thing, changes policy positions based on perhaps, like we have said, what is the middle consensus.
I think she's done. I think her time in national politics is over. I can see her running for governor of California or something like that, down the line. Or there's even been the kind of deranged take to put her on the Supreme Court to get Sotomayor to step down and instate her on the Supreme Court during this lame duck 2 months that are left in the administration. That seems unbelievable, but it's been floated. So here's one thing that I think is actually a really good result of the election that I don't think has gotten enough airtime, which is that one thing that was proven to not be true by the results of this election is that demographics are destiny. This has been a line that both Democrats and Republicans have repeated, saying that having the country become less white, having more Latinos in the United States is going to lead to a situation where Democrats have the majority in all these different races. And based on the demographic results of this election, that's not true. You might even say the great replacement theory is now evidently not true based on those results. And that's a great thing. The idea that we can get away from demographics ruling everything in our politics, to the extent that happens, I think that that'll lead to a much less division and polarization. And so, I mean, that's my question is the era of identity politics over?
It's a great point. I mean, I personally hadn't heard it laid out as such. But one would think that with this mandate, this broad based across racial lines, across class lines, across gender lines to an extent, that is the type of atmosphere in which Trump really can be a unifying president. And it seems like he's attempting to course correct in that direction. I mean, perhaps it was just Trump being a troll on Twitter, but I saw something to the effect of him saying that the Republican Party should take over the debts, pay off the debts of the Democratic Party. Maybe that's just fun little Trumpism. Man really knows how to restructure some debts. But perhaps, if that ends up being the case, and I do think that there's probably an outside chance of it happening, that, majority probability is the status quo of fractured relations, and, a different Trump-based world is something that can have, alienative effects to these different racial animuses that have been fostered by all of this identity politics being thrown at us, from in the public schools to in DEI in the workplace, to all of this just becoming a little bit out of style. That would be pretty great. I mean, at its core is like, it didn't want to be addressed by Democrats, but Kamala was the DEI candidate. It was explicated as such by Biden in 2020 when selecting a running mate. He said he was going to pick a black woman. That is a definitional DEI hire. And the fact that we didn't address that makes me feel like just the wheels were off of the car from the start.
And the regression in DEI is a perfect example of why the era of identity politics is over. All these companies are now gutting these departments that they had nominally set up for DEI. And yeah, to your point, like, nobody even addressed that during the election. I mean, I think that the Democrats made all sorts of missteps in this, like, branding Latino as Latinx or Latinx, like it's some Elon Musk startup. Like I don't think Latino people like that at all.
Yeah, seriously, especially like these ethnic groups. I mean, I feel like I have like a somewhat nearsighted, somewhat firsthand experience with this. That when they come to America, it's that transition from coming from a third world country, or even just some other part of the world, into America, is one of conservatism leaning towards a more liberal worldview and mindset, just based on going from outside the Western world to the Western world. This modus operandi of how we exist in Western society is way different than what happens in Latin America, in parts of the Middle East, in far flung parts of Asia. It's such a bastardization of logic to think that they all live in this kind of appeal to Hollywoodization, commodification of race that exists in media and depictions. Like, it just feels it was a little uncomfortable in 2016. It got replayed in 2020, and then the third part of the movie series just jumped way over the shark, and everyone saw it for what it was and rejected it.
Yeah, and Democrats kind of thought they could just get away with it by being like, yeah, they're not a monolith, and just repeating that line over and over again doesn't mean that you're not treating them like they're a monolith. Like, it's
it's a pretty monolithic thing to say too.
To every single Democrat. Yeah, exactly. It's crazy.